They push you away, expecting you to chase. But remember this, what you chase runs faster, and what you ignore starts to slow down. That line right there, my friends, is the heart of today's truth. People don't always pull away because they're confused, or because they suddenly don't know what they want. Many times, they pull away because they believe you will run after them. That's the hidden game. The push isn't rejection, it's bait. They test how much you're willing to lose yourself just to hold on to them. But what if, instead of running, you stood still? What if, instead of begging for presence, you chose silence? That's where the power flips. Before we go deep into this, hit that like button, subscribe, and stay with me, because today we're going to break the cycle of chasing, and you're going to learn how to respond with power, not panic. Hey folks, imagine this. You're holding a rope with someone on the other end. At first, you're both holding it tight, balanced, steady. But suddenly, they start pulling back, step by step, letting the rope slip from their hands. They're waiting to see if you'll grab tighter, hold on harder, and exhaust yourself to keep the connection alive. That's the psychology behind why they push you away. It's not always distance for clarity, it's distance for control. And if you take the bait, if you start tugging desperately to keep that rope from falling, you've already lost. Marcus Aurelius once said, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." Let that sink in, because when someone pushes you away, the instinct is to panic, to think, "What did I do wrong? How do I fix this? How do I prove myself?" But that instinct is exactly what they're counting on. They want you to dance to their rhythm, to lose your calm, to hand over your control like a gift. And here's the lie most of us fall for. We believe chasing equals love. That persistence means loyalty. That tolerating silence makes us strong. But no, my friends, love is not proven through desperation. Real love is proven through mutual effort. If you're the only one holding the rope, you're not in love. You're in captivity. Let me make it plain with another image. Imagine watering a plant that refuses to grow. Day after day, you pour your energy, your presence, your love into it, but instead of blooming, it just shrinks further into the soil. At what point do you realize the problem isn't your water, it's the soil? That's what chasing someone who pushes you away feels like. You drain yourself, you pour everything out, but nothing grows. And then you blame yourself for not being enough. That's the trap. But here's the twist. The moment you stop chasing, everything changes. The one who pushed you away suddenly feels the silence. They feel the absence. They start to wonder, wait, did I lose control? Did I miscalculate? Why aren't they running after me? That's when the game flips, because silence isn't weakness, it's a mirror, and the one who thought you'd always be there now has to face the emptiness they created. Folks, listen closely. You don't need to argue, you don't need to explain, you don't need to beg for their time or attention, you need to stand firm. To remember that chasing someone who runs is like trying to hold on to smoke. It leaves you empty every time. So, if you've been feeling that pull, if you've been tempted to chase, remember this. Your value is not measured by how fast you run after someone who walks away. Your worth is in your calm, in your silence, in your ability to stand tall while they expect you to fall. That's Stoic power, and I want you to claim it right now. Type it in the comments. My silence is power. Say it out loud if you have to. Show yourself, show the world, and let the one who thought they could push you around feel it. Hit the like button, subscribe, and stay with me, because this is only the beginning. The rest of this message will change the way you see distance forever. Stay calm, stay firm, stay unchained. Number 1. Why they push you away in the first place. Sometimes people don't walk away because they don't want you. They walk away because they want to see if you'll follow. That one hits hard, doesn't it? And yet it explains so much of the confusion you've been carrying. Folks, listen closely. When they pull back, it isn't always about doubt or about needing space to think. Many times, it's a strategy, whether they admit it or not. They want to test your boundaries. They want to see how far they can go before you break. And here's the cruel part. The moment you chase, you've already told them the answer. They can go as far as they like, and you'll still be there. Imagine this. Picture a stage with two actors. Both walk onto it with equal presence. But then one actor takes 3 steps back, folding their arms, creating silence. What happens? The other actor feels pressured to fill the space, to move forward, to say more, to do more, to compensate for the lack. That's exactly the dynamic at play when someone pushes you away. They create space not to lose you, but to make you prove how much you're willing to close the gap. It's performance, it's control disguised as confusion. And what runs through your mind in those moments? Be honest. You ask yourself, did I say something wrong? Did I push too hard? Are they losing interest? Are they testing me? That constant questioning is the seed of manipulation. Because when you live in those questions, you no longer stand firm in your own value. You start bending to their distance, molding yourself to their silence, shrinking yourself to their withdrawal. Seneca once wrote, "We suffer more in imagination than in reality." And isn't that the truth here? Because when they create distance, you imagine every possibility except the simplest one, that they are intentionally pulling away to see if you'll collapse. You don't even realize you're being tested because your mind is busy building scenarios of self-blame. But here's the lie you've been carrying. That people push you away because they're complicated or because they're just going through something. That might be true in rare cases, but most of the time it isn't complexity, it's certainty. They're certain you'll chase. They're certain you'll overcompensate. They're certain you'll keep showing up no matter how little they give. And so, they push. It's like a gambler in a casino. The more times they win small bets, the more reckless they become. They test higher stakes. They double down. Why? Because every time you chase, you prove the bet is safe. You prove that no matter how cold they become, you'll heat the room with your energy. No matter how absent they are, you'll compensate with your presence. And soon, you're not even in a relationship. You're in a gamble, where the house always wins, and you're the house's loyal customer. Let's face it, it's difficult to resist. Because the fear is so real. The fear of losing them. The fear that silence means they're gone forever. The fear that if you don't act, they'll vanish. And fear makes us impulsive. Fear makes us chase. Fear convinces us that their distance is proof of our failure, when in fact, it's often proof of their confidence. They're not pulling away because they're scared. They're pulling away because they're sure that you'll come running. But my friends, let's break this illusion today. Love is not proven by how much suffering you can endure in silence. Love is not proven by how quickly you run after someone who slows down. If the connection is real, it will meet you halfway. If the bond is genuine, it doesn't need constant proving. You don't beg for what is mutual. You don't chase what is already yours. Think of it this way. If you're running after a train that already left the station, who looks more desperate, you or the train? The train keeps going, not even noticing your sprint. But you burn yourself out chasing something that has no intention of stopping. That's the image of what chasing someone who pushes you away looks like. You're sweating, you're exhausted, and they're calmly riding ahead, confident you'll keep running until you collapse. Marcus Aurelius said, "If you are pained by external things, it is not they that disturb you, but your own judgment of them." And that's what makes this so hard. Because your judgment convinces you that silence equals loss, when in truth, silence is often bait. They want to see what you'll do when the attention isn't instant, when the affection isn't obvious. And if you keep rewarding that behavior with pursuit, you don't just lose them, you lose yourself. But here's the rise from the ashes. Once you see the game, you don't have to play it. Once you realize that pushing away is often a strategy, you can flip the script. Instead of chasing, you hold your ground. Instead of proving, you stay still. Instead of running, you let them walk. And that silence, that restraint, is what destabilizes everything. Because they expect panic, not peace. They expect begging, not boundaries. They expect reaction, not reflection. And when you don't deliver what they predicted, the power shifts. Suddenly, the one who pulled away has to wonder, why didn't they chase me? Did I lose control? Did I lose value? Am I not as secure as I thought? The very fear they wanted you to feel now starts gnawing at them. That's the paradox of Stoic strength. You don't need to fight for control, you just need to stop handing it away. You don't need to raise your voice, you just need to lower your reaction. You don't need to chase what runs, you need to stand still and let the runner tire themselves out. Because at the end of the day, the person who doesn't flinch holds the power. So here's your affirmation for today. I do not chase, I stand firm. Write it in the comments right now. Show yourself, show the world, show the people who thought you'd always be available. This is your shield, this is your weapon, this is your turning point. And stay with me, because what comes next will show you why your silence isn't just survival, it's transformation. When you stop chasing, the game doesn't just change, it ends. Number 2, the silent expectation. They want you to chase. They don't step back because they're lost. They step back because they're certain you'll move forward. This is the truth most people never see. Folks, listen carefully. When someone creates distance, when they suddenly become cold, when they let your messages sit without a reply, it's rarely by accident. More often than not, it's deliberate. It's not confusion, it's calculation. They're not waiting to figure out what they want. They're waiting to see what you'll do. Imagine this scene. A fisherman on a calm lake. He casts out his line, drops a little bait, then sits back in silence. He doesn't move, doesn't panic, doesn't rush. He waits, knowing the fish will feel the tug of temptation and swim right into the trap. That's what silence is in this dynamic. It's bait. They don't speak, they don't show affection, they don't give clarity because they know silence is a hook. They know your fear of being forgotten will pull you in. And what do you feel in those moments? Anxiety. Your mind starts racing with questions. Why aren't they replying? Did I do something wrong? Are they losing interest? Should I double text? Should I call? Should I prove I care? That's the exact mental storm they expect. They want your silence to feel unbearable so that their silence can stay powerful. Let's break the lie right here. The lie that chasing proves love. Folks, chasing doesn't prove your love. It proves your dependency. It proves that their absence shakes you more than your own dignity can steady you. That's why they push away in the first place. They want to confirm their power. They want to confirm their control. They want to feel that no matter how far they pull, you'll keep reaching. Think about this like a chessboard. Every piece has power, but the player who moves last has the advantage. When they withdraw, they're waiting for your move. And if your move is predictable, if you always chase when they step back, you've lost the game before it even began, because the predictable player is always the weaker one. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." What does that mean here? It means when they create distance, you don't lose because they pulled away. You lose because you gave them control of your reaction. The real battle isn't their silence, it's your fear of it. And make no mistake, the fear is real. Silence feels like rejection. No reply feels like abandonment. Distance feels like death to someone desperate for reassurance. But here's the reality. Silence only hurts when you give it meaning. If you decide that their delay is proof of your worth, you hand them your value. If you decide that their absence defines your presence, you hand them your power. Let me give you another metaphor. Picture a stage magician holding out an empty hat. He waves his hands, says the magic words, and the audience leans in closer, convinced something's about to happen. That's the trick of silence. It pulls you in, makes you anticipate, makes you react, even though there's nothing inside the hat. The power isn't in the silence itself, it's in the way you've been trained to expect something out of it. And here's where the manipulation gets dangerous. They know you'll fill the silence with your imagination. You'll write excuses for them. You'll justify their distance. You'll think they must be busy. They must be tired. They must be going through something. And while you're excusing them, you're exhausting yourself. While you're explaining their absence, you're ignoring your own pain. That's how they win, by letting you do all the work of keeping the connection alive. But let's tell the truth. People who truly care don't test your patience for sport. They don't starve you of attention just to see if you'll beg for food. They don't withhold love to measure your desperation. That's not love. That's leverage. And leverage only works if you give it weight. So why do they expect you to chase? Because history taught them you would. Maybe not just with you, but with others. They've seen how fear makes people move. They've seen how silence makes people crawl. And they've built confidence on the assumption that silence equals control. They expect you to respond like everyone else, quickly, anxiously, desperately. That's the expectation you must break. And I know, folks, it's not easy. Everything in you wants to react. Everything in you wants to prove yourself. Everything in you screams, do something before they leave for good. But that's the lie again, that their silence means they're already gone. No. Many times, silence is just a test. And every test is an opportunity to show strength. Seneca once said, "The greatest remedy for anger is delay." Let's expand that. The greatest remedy for manipulation is delay. Don't give them the instant reaction they expect. Don't rush to prove yourself. Don't scramble to fix what they intentionally broke. Instead, stand still, because silence against silence isn't weakness, it's equilibrium. It's saying, if you want to step back, I won't step forward just to close the gap. I'll let the gap stay until you decide to cross it. Imagine a tug of war. Two people pulling on opposite sides of a rope. The tension builds, each pulling harder, waiting for the other to let go. But here's the secret. If you drop your end of the rope, the game ends. No tension, no struggle, no victory for them. That's what happens when you stop chasing. They lose the game they thought they controlled. And here's what makes this powerful. When you don't chase, their silence turns against them. They start to feel it. They start to wonder, why didn't they run after me? Did I lose them? Did I misjudge my value? The silence they thought would control you now controls them. The mirror flips. And in that mirror, they face the emptiness they tried to force onto you. But you only get there if you refuse to play. If you stop chasing, if you stop explaining, if you stop carrying both sides of the connection. And that's not cruelty, it's clarity. It's showing them that your dignity weighs more than their distance. So here's what I want you to hold on to. When someone pushes you away, don't see it as a loss. See it as a test. And instead of running forward, plant your feet. Show them you won't collapse. Show them you won't beg. Show them you won't keep proving yourself to someone who withholds theirs. And I want you to anchor this truth with an affirmation. Type it in the comments right now. I do not chase, I hold my ground. Say it, own it, show it to yourself and to the world. Because the moment you stop chasing, you stop losing. And the moment you stop losing, the game begins to turn. Stay with me, because in the next part, we're going deeper into why reacting too quickly is the trap they count on, and how you can break free from it forever. Number 3. The psychological trap of reacting too fast. The quickest reaction is often the weakest response. My friends, that line is the hidden key to everything we're talking about today. When someone pushes you away, when they create distance, when they drop silence like a heavy stone into the middle of your connection, your natural instinct is to react immediately. To close the gap, to send the message, to double text, to explain yourself, to prove your worth before it's too late. But here's the brutal truth. Reacting too fast doesn't bring them closer, it pushes them further away. Imagine a chessboard. The player who rushes their moves, who panics and throws their pieces forward without thinking, always loses. Not because they don't care, but because they don't calculate. The player who reacts fastest is the one who falls into the trap every single time. That's exactly how emotional manipulation works. They set the board, they create the silence, and then they just wait. Because they know your reaction will come quickly, impulsively, desperately, and the moment you rush, they win. Ask yourself honestly, how many times have you been here? How many times did you send the first message after a fight? How many times did you rush to call just to hear their voice again? How many times did you go to bed with a stomach full of anxiety, only to wake up and type a long paragraph explaining yourself before they even asked for it? And after all of that, did they value your effort? Or did they act colder, more distant, more untouchable? That's the trap. The faster you react, the weaker you look. The weaker you look, the easier it is for them to push you again. And little by little, without even realizing it, you condition them to know this. Every time they pull away, you'll come running. Marcus Aurelius once said, "You always own the option of having no opinion." That means you don't always need to respond. You don't always need to explain. You don't always need to react. Silence itself can be an answer, sometimes the strongest answer. But when you don't understand this, when fear controls you, you forget the power of waiting. You forget the strength in restraint, and you hand over your dignity for the illusion of reassurance. Here's a metaphor that will stick with you. Think about fire. Fire only grows when it has oxygen. If you rush to fan the flames every time it starts to dim, you don't just keep it alive, you make it bigger, stronger, more consuming. That's what happens when you react instantly to someone's distance. Their silence is the fire, and your reaction is the oxygen. The more you give, the more the game burns you alive. But let's go deeper into the psychology. Why do you react so quickly? Because silence creates a vacuum, and the human mind hates vacuums. The moment there's a gap in communication, your brain fills it with worst-case scenarios. They must not care. They must be with someone else. They must be done with me. Those thoughts trigger anxiety, and anxiety demands action. Action in this case means chasing, and chasing means you've already lost. Folks, let me tell you this, 9 out of 10 times the silence isn't even about you, but the second you react too fast, you make it about you. You place yourself in the weaker position, and the other person learns, I can step back any time, and they'll come forward to fill the gap. That's not attraction, that's conditioning, and you're the one training them to devalue you. Seneca once said, "No man is more unhappy than he who never faces adversity. For he is not permitted to prove himself. Silence is adversity. Distance is adversity. And the only way to prove yourself is not by breaking under it, but by holding firm through it. If you can resist the urge to react too fast, you pass the test. If you can sit with the discomfort, you win. Not because you controlled them, but because you controlled yourself. But let's be real, it's not easy. Everything in you wants to act. Everything in you screams that if you don't reply, you'll lose them forever. That if you don't explain, they'll forget you. That if you don't prove your worth right now, the connection will die. That's the fear. But here's the truth. If the connection can only survive when you keep chasing, then it's already dead. Let me give you another image. Imagine a scale with weights on both sides. At first it's balanced. You give, they give. But when they pull back and you rush to give more, the scale tips completely. Suddenly, you're carrying all the weight and they're carrying nothing. That's not balance, that's bondage. And the longer it continues, the heavier you feel, until you're crushed under the pressure of a connection that only survives because you won't stop feeding it. The hardest part is this: slowing down, waiting, resisting the urge to respond, letting silence exist without rushing to fill it. That's where the real power lies, because the moment you stop reacting instantly, the dynamic changes. Suddenly, they're the ones sitting in silence, waiting for your move. Suddenly, they're the ones wondering, why didn't they reply? Did I lose my grip? Are they slipping away? That's when the game starts to reverse. Folks, remember this. The first reaction is always the cheapest reaction. Anyone can send a quick message. Anyone can beg. Anyone can prove themselves in desperation. But the person who waits, the person who holds their ground, the person who doesn't let fear dictate their timing, that's the one who commands respect. So, how do you break the trap? By rewiring your response to silence. The next time they push you away, remind yourself, this is not proof of my failure. This is a test of my strength. The next time you want to send that double text, pause and ask yourself, am I proving my love, or am I proving my dependency? The next time you want to rush in and fix everything, stop and remember, if I have to fix it alone, it isn't real. And let me tell you, when you master this, everything changes. You no longer live in fear of their silence. You no longer hand over your worth to their absence. You no longer panic every time the phone doesn't buzz. You become calm, centered, untouchable, and nothing destabilizes a manipulator more than someone who refuses to play the game. This is where your power begins, with restraint, with waiting, with holding back the reaction they're counting on. That's how you break the trap. That's how you turn silence into strength. That's how you teach them, without saying a word, that your value is not up for negotiation. So here's your affirmation. I choose restraint over reaction. Write it in the comments right now. Show yourself, show the world, and let the one who thought they could predict your every move see that you've changed the script. And stay with me, because in the next part, we're going to go even deeper into the Stoic principle that proves why restraint isn't weakness at all, but the ultimate form of strength. That's where the real shift begins. Number 4, the Stoic principle, power in restraint. The strong man is not the one who strikes back in anger, but the one who holds his hand when provoked. That's not just a quote, my friends. It's a blueprint. And it's one that too many people ignore because restraint feels like weakness. In a world that glorifies reaction, restraint looks like silence, like doing nothing, like passivity. But Stoicism teaches us the opposite truth. Real power is not in the loud outburst, not in the desperate chase, not in the frantic proving. It's in the ability to remain still when every nerve in your body screams for action. Let's picture it this way. Imagine two warriors standing in a battlefield. One is restless, sword swinging at every shadow, wasting his strength on illusions. The other stands calm, his blade unmoved, his eyes steady. He doesn't fight every provocation. He doesn't exhaust himself chasing phantoms. He waits, he calculates, he holds, and when he finally does move, his strike is precise, undeniable, and decisive. Which warrior do you think lasts longer? Which warrior truly commands respect? It's never the one who reacts too quickly. It's always the one who masters restraint. When they push you away, when they give you silence, when they expect you to chase, that is their provocation. That is their battlefield strategy. They want you restless. They want you swinging your sword wildly. They want you draining your own energy, trying to force closeness that they deliberately withheld. Because if you react, you confirm their power. But if you resist, if you stand firm in silence, you teach a lesson they never saw coming. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." Think about the weight of that line. You cannot control if someone pulls away. You cannot control if they stop texting back. You cannot control if they create distance, but you can always control what you do with that silence. That is where your real power lies, not in changing them, but in mastering yourself. And here's the paradox. Restraint feels harder than reaction. Why? Because restraint requires patience, restraint requires courage, restraint requires sitting in discomfort without letting it break you. Reaction is easy, reaction is instant. It's the quick text, the emotional call, the desperate explanation. Restraint, on the other hand, is discipline. And discipline is what separates the weak from the strong. Let me give you another metaphor. Imagine you're holding a bow and arrow. If you release the string too soon, the arrow flies weak, directionless, and falls short. But if you hold back, if you steady your aim, if you resist the urge to release too early, then when the arrow does leave your hand, it pierces the target with precision. Restraint is the bowstring. Without it, your energy is wasted. With it, your energy is deadly effective. Now, why do most people fail this test? Because restraint is misunderstood. They think if they don't react, they'll lose everything. They think if they stay silent, the other person will forget them. They think restraint equals indifference. But here's the truth. Restraint doesn't mean you don't care. It means you care about yourself enough not to sell your worth for cheap. It means you've stopped trying to prove yourself to someone who uses distance as a weapon. It means you've chosen dignity over desperation. Seneca put it this way: "He who is brave is free." Restraint is bravery, because it takes courage to resist the urge to chase. It takes courage to resist the urge to prove. It takes courage to sit in the silence and let the other person face the emptiness they created. And that courage makes you free. Free from their games, free from their manipulation, free from the endless cycle of push and pull. But let's be honest, restraint feels unnatural at first, because everything in you will want to break it. You'll feel the itch to respond, to close the gap, to relieve the tension. Your heart will race, your mind will scream, the silence will feel like rejection. But here's where you rise, by recognizing that discomfort is not death. Silence is not proof of your worth. Distance is not destruction, it's the battlefield where you prove your strength. Folks, think of water. When water is calm, it reflects everything with perfect clarity. But when it's disturbed, when it ripples and churns, the reflection is distorted. The same is true for your mind. When you are restless, when you are reactive, you cannot see clearly. But when you are calm, when you are restrained, you see everything for what it is. Their silence is no longer a storm, it's a mirror. And in that mirror, you recognize the truth. If love is real, it will not need chasing. If respect is present, it will not require begging. Now let me hit you with a harder truth. The reason restraint is so powerful is because it reverses the game. They expected you to react. They depended on it. They created the distance, knowing it would trigger your panic. But when you don't react, when you hold still, their strategy fails. Suddenly, they're the ones restless. They're the ones checking their phone. They're the ones wondering, why didn't they chase me? Did I lose them? Did I miscalculate? Their silence becomes their burden, not yours. That's the beauty of restraint. It turns the weight back onto them. It doesn't scream. It doesn't argue. It doesn't explain. It simply says, without words, I will not play this game. And that, my friends, is the loudest message you can send. But let's be clear, restraint isn't about punishing them. It's not about revenge. It's not about making them suffer. Restraint is about protecting yourself, about preserving your dignity, about reminding yourself that you are not a slave to someone else's behavior, that your worth is not tied to their attention span, that your presence is not a bargaining chip to be thrown around in games of distance and pursuit. Restraint is power because it teaches you the one thing they never expected you to learn, that you don't need them to feel whole, that you don't need constant validation to know your value, that you don't need to prove yourself every time someone creates space. And when you embody that truth, you become untouchable. Let me leave you with a final image. Imagine a lion in the wild. The lion doesn't chase every sound it hears. It doesn't run after every rustle in the grass. It doesn't waste energy on illusions. The lion waits. The lion restrains. And when the moment is right, when the target is real, the lion moves with power no one can stop. That's you, when you choose restraint. Not weak, not passive, calm, powerful, inevitable. So I want you to anchor this lesson with an affirmation. Type it in the comments right now. My restraint is my strength. Say it out loud. Show yourself. Show the world. Show anyone who thought your silence was weakness that it was in fact the strongest response of all. And stay with me, because in the next part, you'll see how silence, when used with clarity, doesn't just protect you, it destabilizes them. It turns absence into power, and it teaches lessons no words could ever deliver. Number 5. Turning silence into a weapon of dignity. Never waste your words on those who value your silence more than your presence. Think about that for a moment, my friends. Too often, you believe that the way to win back respect, attention, or love is through explanation, through more words, more effort, more chasing. But what if the most devastating and dignified move you could ever make was no move at all? What if silence itself could cut deeper than any explanation? What if restraint and absence could do the teaching that no argument ever could? That, right there, is the secret. Silence, when chosen with clarity, becomes not weakness, but a weapon. And not just any weapon, it becomes a sword of dignity, cutting through manipulation and leaving behind only respect for yourself. Let me paint you a picture. Imagine a courtroom. One side argues endlessly, throwing accusations, shouting, scrambling to prove their point. The other side, however, sits calm, saying nothing. At first, the silence looks like surrender, but then, the longer it goes on, the more the noisy side looks foolish, desperate, insecure. That's the paradox of silence. It doesn't just protect you, it exposes them. It throws the weight of their own behavior back onto their shoulders. When someone pushes you away, when they starve you of affection, when they create distance, they expect noise from you. They expect the paragraph-long texts, the late-night calls, the explanations, the desperation. They expect you to react. But silence shatters that expectation. Silence flips the script. Because silence doesn't feed their ego, it starves it. Silence doesn't fuel the game, it ends it. And the one who thought they had control suddenly finds themselves fighting with nothing but their own echo. Seneca once said, "It is better to conquer our grief than to deceive it." Silence, my friends, is not deception. It is not manipulation. It is not a fake performance. It is the conscious choice to stop playing a game that was never fair in the first place. It is the moment you say, not with words, but with absence, "I will not dance to your rhythm anymore." That is not cruelty, that is dignity. But let's be real, using silence feels terrifying at first. Why? Because we live in a world where talking feels like action, where chasing feels like effort, where begging feels like proof of love. Silence feels too light. Silence feels like doing nothing. Silence feels like losing. But this is the lie. The truth is, silence is the heaviest answer you can ever give. Because silence cannot be argued with, silence cannot be twisted, silence cannot be manipulated, silence leaves the other person alone with themselves, and that is a punishment no explanation can rival. Imagine an artist painting a canvas. Every stroke, every line, every color fills the space. But what makes the painting powerful isn't just the paint, it's the empty space around it. It's the silence of the canvas that gives the colors meaning. Without emptiness, the art has no shape. The same is true for relationships. Without silence, your presence is taken for granted. Without absence, your words mean nothing. It is the silence, the deliberate withholding, that makes your value visible. Here's the difficult truth. When you keep reacting, when you keep chasing, when you keep proving, you reinforce their game. You confirm that silence works on you. But when you hold your ground, when you refuse to fill the silence with desperation, when you let absence be your answer, you stop playing by their rules. You build your own. That is how silence becomes a weapon, not of revenge, but of self-respect. And here's the irony. They will feel it. They will feel it harder than any message you could have sent. Why? Because their entire control was built on the certainty of your reaction. They pulled away, confident that you would come closer. They ignored you, certain that you would insist. They created distance, sure that you would collapse it. But when you don't, when you stay still, when you let silence speak, that certainty crumbles. Their ego doesn't know what to do. Their strategy implodes, and they are left with the one thing they never wanted to face: themselves. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The best revenge is to be unlike him who performed the injury." Silence is that revenge, not because it hurts them, but because it protects you. You don't repay manipulation with manipulation. You don't repay cruelty with cruelty. You don't lower yourself to their games. Instead, you rise above them. You walk away with grace. You give no performance, no speech, no drama, only silence. And in that silence, your dignity becomes untouchable. Think about the lion again. The lion doesn't roar at every little sound in the jungle. The lion saves its roar for when it truly matters. That's why the lion is king, not because it makes the most noise, but because its restraint makes its presence undeniable. That's you when you choose silence. You stop being predictable. You stop being available on command. You stop being the one who feeds the game. Instead, you become the enigma, the mystery, the presence they can no longer control. And yes, folks, it's hard, because silence requires patience. Silence requires you to sit with the discomfort of not knowing, of not reacting, of not chasing. It forces you to resist the urge to prove yourself. But that's where the transformation begins. Because once you master silence, you master yourself. You are no longer pulled by their distance, no longer shaken by their games, no longer desperate for their crumbs. You are calm, you are firm, you are untouchable. Let me remind you of this truth. Those who deserve your presence will never test you with silence. They won't starve you just to watch you beg for food. They won't pull away just to see if you'll collapse. Real love doesn't play games. Real connection doesn't need tests. And so, when you choose silence, you're not just protecting yourself, you're also exposing them. You're showing the difference between genuine love and manipulative control. So here's what I want you to take from this. Your silence is not empty. It's full of strength, full of boundaries, full of dignity. It's not absence, it's presence in another form. It says, louder than any words ever could, I refuse to chase. I refuse to beg. I refuse to lose myself just to keep someone else. And here's your affirmation for this section. My silence protects my dignity. Type it in the comments right now. Don't just think it, declare it. Show yourself, show the world, and let anyone who tried to push you away understand that your silence is not weakness. It is your weapon. Stay with me, because in the next part, we're going to explore the mirror effect, the moment when your silence doesn't just protect you, but reflects back onto them, forcing them to feel the emptiness they created. And that, my friends, is where the real game begins to crumble. Number 6. The mirror effect. When they feel their own absence. The silence you once suffered becomes the silence they cannot survive. That, my friends, is the turning point. When you stop chasing, when you stop explaining, when you stop filling the void they created, something strange happens. The silence that used to suffocate you now starts suffocating them. The absence they thought would weaken you becomes the mirror in which they finally see themselves, and that mirror is not kind, it is brutal. Let me paint this picture. Imagine standing in front of a mirror every day, but instead of your own reflection, you see someone else. Their choices, their neglect, their absence. Every time you look, the reflection shows not your desperation, but their distance. That's what your silence does. It reflects back the coldness they projected, the distance they created, the manipulation they relied on. Suddenly, they can no longer escape the truth of their own behavior, and that realization cuts deeper than any words you could have thrown at them. At first, they won't admit it. They'll pretend they're fine. They'll laugh louder, post more on social media, act like your silence doesn't touch them. But understand this. Every echo they hear, every gap in the conversation, every night that feels too long is their own absence being thrown back in their face. They once believed you would always be there to absorb the silence, to chase the distance, to bridge the gap. Now they're left alone in the emptiness they built. Marcus Aurelius once said, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." And here's the strength of silence. It doesn't control them directly. It doesn't force them back. It doesn't beg for their attention. It simply withdraws your energy, and in that withdrawal, they're forced to face themselves. That's the mirror effect. The silence doesn't shout, it reflects. Think of it like a canyon. You shout into it, and your own voice comes back to you. When they try to provoke you with distance, what comes back to them now is not your reaction, it's their own emptiness. They don't hear your desperate voice anymore, they only hear the echo of their own games. And echoes, when you're alone, can drive you mad. But why does this happen? Because people often don't value presence until it turns into absence. They take for granted the constant stream of love, attention, and effort. They assume it will always be there because it always has been. They mistake consistency for permanence. They confuse loyalty with dependency. And then, when you finally withdraw, the shock is overwhelming. They thought silence was their weapon, but now silence belongs to you. And silence, when used with dignity, destabilizes everything. Imagine a musician who plays an instrument every day. They grow so used to the sound that they stop appreciating it. But one day, the instrument is gone. No strings, no notes, no sound. Suddenly, the silence in the room feels unbearable. Not because the sound was perfect, but because its absence is louder than they ever imagined. That's how your silence feels to them. The music of your presence is gone, and now the silence roars. At first, they will resist the mirror. They will blame you. They will tell themselves you're cold, you're detached, you don't care. But deep down, the truth is unavoidable. The silence they feel is the silence they created. The absence that now haunts them is the absence they first handed to you. That is the mirror effect. You are no longer carrying their behavior. They are, and it corrodes from the inside. Seneca once said, "Most powerful is he who has himself in his own power." And that's why this works. You're not controlling them, you're controlling yourself. You're not using silence as manipulation, you're using it as a shield. And in doing so, you give them no reaction, no oxygen, no fuel. What's left? Their own emptiness, their own ego, their own failed control strategy. They are now face to face with the person they've become, and it's not a flattering picture. But let's talk about the shift in dynamics. When you were the one always reacting, the mirror was pointed at you. You questioned yourself, you blamed yourself, you saw every crack in your reflection and thought it was your fault. But when you stepped back, when you chose silence, you turned the mirror around. Now they are the ones seeing the cracks. Now they are the ones questioning. Now they are the ones wondering if they pushed too far, if they lost what they thought was guaranteed, if they destroyed something they cannot rebuild. And here's the beauty. You don't have to prove anything. You don't have to send reminders of your worth. You don't have to make speeches about your value. Silence does the work for you. Because absence is a teacher, words can never be. Absence forces reflection. Absence forces regret. Absence forces the question, what if they don't come back? Think of it like a shadow. As long as you're standing in the light, the shadow stays behind you. But the moment you walk away, the shadow disappears. They thought you'd always be their shadow, following, present, guaranteed. Now when they look, the shadow is gone, and the emptiness left behind terrifies them. But let's be real, this doesn't happen overnight. At first, they'll act indifferent. They'll test your silence. They'll wait for you to break. But as the days pass, as the silence holds, as the absence grows heavier, the mirror sharpens. They see more clearly, and clarity hurts. Clarity makes them realize that the very game they played has ended, not with noise, but with absence. This is why silence is not weakness. Silence is clarity. Silence is dignity. Silence is truth reflected back. And in that reflection, they finally see what they've lost. Because silence makes one thing undeniable. If you have to chase it, it was never real. If you have to beg for it, it was never yours. And if you can walk away from it, you never needed it in the first place. So here's your affirmation for this lesson. My silence is their mirror. Write it in the comments. Claim it. Show yourself, show the world, and let anyone who thought you would always run after them face the reflection of their own absence. Stay with me, because in the next part, we're going to expose the moment they inevitably come back. They will test the waters, drop a message, throw a crumb, and I will show you exactly how to remain untouchable, because the return is not the victory. The real victory is never losing yourself again. Number 7. When they come back, how to stay untouchable. The one who walks away expecting you to run always returns in disbelief when you don't. That is the cruel irony, my friends. The very people who pushed you away, who ignored your effort, who tested your patience, they come back. Not always because they suddenly realized your worth, but because silence unsettled them. Because your absence carved a hole in their certainty. Because the game they thought they controlled no longer has a player on the other side. At first, Their return doesn't look dramatic. It rarely does. They don't show up with flowers, tears, and apologies. No, they test the waters. A random "hey" at midnight, a vague emoji on your story, a breadcrumb text like, "How have you been?" as if they didn't already know. This is not love. This is not clarity. This is curiosity, control, and ego searching for reassurance. They want to know, are you still there? Do you still react? Do you still run? Let me give you a picture. Imagine a fisherman who cast out his net weeks ago, confident he'd catch something. He pulls the rope back, expecting it to be heavy with fish, only to find it empty. His hands tremble, his confidence breaks. He throws the net again, hoping maybe the fish are still circling. That's what their return is. It's them pulling the rope, expecting you to still be caught, only to realize the net is empty because you slipped away in silence. Now here's the danger. You'll be tempted. Their return will spark something in you. Your heart will race. You'll feel that rush of hope. Maybe they realized their mistake. Maybe this time will be different. Maybe they finally see me. That right there is the trap, because 9 times out of 10, they don't return because they've changed. They return because they miss the control, because your absence made them uncomfortable, because the ego that once fed on your desperation is now starving. Marcus Aurelius once said, "If it is not right, do not do it. If it is not true, do not say it." Apply that here. If their return is not consistent, not true, not aligned with your dignity, you owe them nothing. Not a quick reply, not instant forgiveness, not open access. Silence taught them a lesson. Now, dignity enforces it. Think of a locked door. Once you left it wide open. They could walk in and out whenever they wanted. They slammed it, left it ajar, disrespected the space. And every time you kept opening it again, hoping they'd stay. But now your silence has locked it. So when they knock, when they wiggle the handle, when they try to see if it's still open, you must remember, the lock is there for a reason. You don't tear it down just because they remembered your address. And let me tell you why this moment matters so much. Because how you handle their return determines whether the cycle restarts or ends forever. If you rush back in, if you reply instantly, if you celebrate their crumbs, you tell them the silence was just a test and you failed it. You tell them that no matter how far they push, you'll always come back. And the game begins again. But if you stay calm, if you stay untouchable, if you respond with indifference or not at all, you confirm what silence already hinted. You're no longer available for manipulation. Seneca said, "No man is free who is a slave to his body." Let's adapt it. No soul is free who is a slave to someone else's inconsistency. Their return will tempt your emotions, your hopes, your longing. But freedom comes from restraint. Freedom comes from remembering why you chose silence in the first place. Freedom comes from holding your dignity higher than their crumbs. And here's the truth they never expected. You don't need them anymore. The silence taught you that. The absence built you. The distance made you stronger. So when they return, it's not about revenge. It's about recognition. You recognize the pattern. You recognize the test. You recognize that what once enslaved you now sets you free. Let me give you another metaphor. Imagine a fire that once burned you. You kept reaching toward it, hoping for warmth, only to get scorched every time. Then one day, you pulled your hand back. The fire still burns, but now you see it differently. You don't need to touch it anymore. You know its nature. And when the fire flickers in your direction, trying to pull you back, you smile. Because you've learned, you don't need its warmth. You became your own flame. That's what being untouchable means. It doesn't mean you hate them. It doesn't mean you hold bitterness. It means you've outgrown the game. It means you no longer react the way they expect. It means their return no longer shakes your ground, because your silence built a foundation too solid to be moved by crumbs. And this is where you must stand firm, not just for yourself, but for your future. Because every time you break your silence for the wrong person, you betray your healing. Every time you celebrate crumbs, you tell yourself that scraps are enough. Every time you allow manipulation back into your life, you lose a piece of your dignity. But when you stay untouchable, when you remain calm in the face of their return, when you let silence speak for you, you don't just win the game, you end it. So let me say this clearly. When they come back, don't rush, don't fold, don't explain, don't beg, don't prove. Let your calm be your answer. Let your restraint be your shield. Let your dignity be your weapon. Because nothing destabilizes someone who expected your desperation more than your indifference. And here's the affirmation I want you to claim right now. I am untouchable. Write it in the comments. Show yourself. Show the world. Show the very people who thought you'd always chase that you've risen above the game. Now, before we close, let me leave you with this final thought. Silence was never weakness. It was your rebirth. Distance was never the end. It was the beginning. Absence wasn't punishment. It was protection. And their return? That's not your victory. Your victory is knowing you no longer need them, that you no longer collapse in their silence, that you no longer trade your dignity for crumbs. That, my friends, is freedom. So if this spoke to you today, if it gave you clarity, if it reminded you of your worth, do this now. Press the like button, subscribe, and share this message with someone who needs it. Because together, we're building a community of strength, of dignity, of silence that speaks louder than manipulation. Stay with me, because this journey doesn't end here. This is just the beginning of your untouchable self.